Sir Jory belched indecorously, barely hiding his mouth behind his hand in time. Sir Jessica winced and rolled her eyes. Her friend and rival pretended not to notice as he settled back in his chair. Ruthlessly efficient yearfolk began to clear away the plates and platters. All along the table, glasses clinked and cutlery rattled, as the murmur of conversation began to rise like a tide that threatened to drown out the music from the gallery. "That was worth waiting for," said Sir Jory, his smile slightly lopsided and his eyes a little bright. He had been drinking all afternoon. He glared around him at his fellow nobles and shook his head. "When did everyone become so young?" He spoke a little plaintively. Sir Jessica sighed again. "You know when," she said lightly, "when you started going grey at the temples, Jory. That's when everyone else became inexplicably young." Her tone did nothing to lift his mood. "Look at them," he said, his voice louder than was necessarily politic. "A new army made up of children who look like they've barely passed their test. This is the new army of Dawn. Green recruits. If Sir Elgar were here." "Elgar fell in Theranin," said Sir Jessica brusquely, "fighting with the Golden Sun." "Elgar?" Jory blinked. "But I saw him at summer. We went fishing. What?" "And now he's dead. Went down under a half a dozen Druids during the retreat. Took most of them with him, so I hear." Jessica's voice was still a little detached, but she rested her hand on Sir Jory's for a moment. "He died gloriously." Sir Jory let out a deep sigh, his expression melancholy, noting both his fellow veterans and the absences where others might have been. So many bright faces, laughing and talking, celebrating the muster. So many empty spaces filled by people he didn't know. Jessica signalled one of the nearby yearfolk, who quickly refilled both their glasses with sparkling white wine. She'd spotted the Earl standing out of the corner of her eye and knew what was coming. "To those who cannot be with us," the Earl's voice cut through the waves of conversation as they stood with their own glass raised. Their toast echoed back and forth across the banquet hall. As the echoes fell away, Sir Jory pushed himself to his feet, raised his own glass to the eastern windows, and made his own toast. "To the hounds of glory," he declared, and finished his wine. There was a moment of uncertainty, mostly from the younger nobles, but then the Earl repeated the toast themselves, and glasses were emptied, and the answering shouts echoed from the rafters. Yet in its wake an air of melancholy swept across the banqueting hall, causing Jessica to frown. Jory had sunk back in his chair, twisting his moustaches, all the good cheer that had built up during the meal threatening to ebb away entirely. Taking matters into her own hands, Sir Jessica stood up and proposed a toast of her own. "To glory!" she bellowed, and the roar of 200 Dornish nobles all shouting at once threatened to raise the roof. As the cheering began to die away, someone else shouted, "Death to the Druge!" And it too was echoed, although with a certain amount of laughter. And then the toast came thick and fast. The Earl Seneschal picked that moment to send the retainers round to deliver platters of cheese, biscuits, preserves, little cakes, and jugs of steaming coffee, and the banquet began to thrum with laughter once more. "Glory, old fool," said Jessica quietly, tilting her glass and the dregs of her wine towards her friend. He gave her a sad smile, but clinked his empty glass against hers, and 5 minutes later he was regaling the new soldiers of the new army with a harrowing tale of hunting Druge infiltrators in Ossium that had the newly minted officers wide-eyed and wide-mouthed, especially when he did the gestures. A new army musters, a new standard is raised. Overview. The people of Dawn are in the process of raising another army in Astolat. It has taken just shy of 2 years, but the army is very close to completing muster, having been funded in large part by Emperor Vesna Borkovna Prochnost, using the hand of the Chancellor. There is one final piece of business to be done, however, and that is to define the nature of the army and formally declare its name. These decisions would normally be made by the senator who raised the original motion, but the task now falls to the newly appointed senator of Astolat, Aemon Ashenmore de Cordreco. Under normal circumstances, the decision will be made by informing the civil service. The Egregores of Dawn have taken counsel with several troubadours and have proposed that an ideal time to announce the decision to the people of Dawn who attend Anvil might be just before the appointment of the senator for the barons, due to be elected at the summit, and have proposed granting a few minutes before the appointment begins to allow Aemon to make their announcement in the Glory Square, should they wish to take advantage of it. The implication is that this news, celebrated by the people of Dawn, could help raise spirits after recent events. By any other name. The new army needs a name, and the task of determining what it will be falls to the Centre for Astolat. The name should not be overly tied to that of the Hounds of Glory. The new army will need a name, one that will stand the test of time and be fit to be sung alongside those of the Golden Sun, Eastern Sky, Griffin's Pride, and the Lost Hounds of Glory. The final decision as to that name lies with the Senator to Astolat, but the newly appointed Aemon Ashenmore de Cordraco may wish to take counsel with the folk of the nation, to find something that captures the spirit of Dawn and expresses the nature of the new army. What is still clear is that the expectation is that the army will not be called the Hounds of Glory, or anything close to that. With the loss fresh in the minds of the folk of Dawn, it was clear that while the sacrifice and glory of the Hounds should be remembered, and the transformation of the Towers of Dusk into Houndsgate has done their memory proud, the new army must stand on its own feet. To do otherwise would risk either cheapening the legacy of the Hounds, or suggesting the new army stands too deep in their shadow to have its own identity, or both. Once the name is chosen, the Weavers of Dawn will create banners and surcoats bearing suitable heraldic devices to be distributed to the soldiers, the final act of equipping the nobles and yearfolk before the army marches. Songs of Love and War. The time has come to choose a special quality for the army. The responsibility falls to the Senator for Astolat. The civil service has presented 3 possibilities, and a 4th possibility has been presented by the nobles of Spiral Castle. Each Imperial army has a quality that defines it. The Eastern Sky are beloved of the people, and favoured by the Eternals of Summer. The Golden Sun are true dreadnoughts on the battlefield, an implacable force grinding their foes into dust as they march. The Griffin's Pride are conquerors, ambitious soldiers who focus first and foremost on seizing the lands of their enemies. The new army will stand beside these 3 armies, in embodying the Dawnish flavour of warfare. At the moment, like any newly mustered army, the newest Dawnish cohort has the green quality. They can't take any special orders or actions, but are ripe to gain a new quality once they are battle-hardened. As always, the civil service has consulted with the soldiers, with the troubadours and priests, with the nobles and even the yearfolk of Dawn, and prepared a list of possible qualities the new army could possess. Of course, there is nothing to prevent the new army being transformed at a later date, much as the Eastern Sky did with the aid of the enchanters, but once chosen, the quality will help define the nature of the army and will not change easily. The civil service have 3 suggestions, and to the surprise of many, a 4th possibility was raised by the nobles of House de Castellon, the regents of Spiral Castle. The first 3 qualities come at no extra cost. The nature of the army easily tends to embrace them, but the 4th requires additional work. Glory. The new Dawnish army could be glorious. Choosing this quality has no additional costs. Eleonaris will provide the general of a glorious new army with a triumphant blade each year as a symbol of their support. The Hounds of Glory are gone, but they are not forgotten. Their legacy lives on in the fact that the Barrens is at last part of Dawn, where it belongs. Their inspiration is still felt by nobles and yearfolk alike. It would be impossible to replace the Hounds, but it would be entirely appropriate for the new Dawnish army to hold to their example. The new Dawnish army could be glorious, ensuring it is feared by its enemies and beloved by its allies. An army of shining armour and bold pennants, upholding the highest aspirations of the people of Dawn wherever it fought. The general of a glorious army can command soldiers to make a triumphant charge while attacking, or a final stand while defending. Triumphant charge. The ability of this army to capture territory is increased by 2/5. Casualties inflicted by this army are increased by 1/5. Casualties suffered by this army are increased by 1/2. A general who unleashes their troops in a triumphant charge seeks great victory, but pays a great price. The army confronts the strongest enemy troops and the most defended positions and attempts to rout them. Individual soldiers and companies engage in valiant attacks, employing risky tactics to defeat their opponents. The army will gain much more ground, but does so at the cost of increased casualties. Final stand. Any victory gained by the enemy converts to additional casualties taken by this army, rather than territory gained. Every enemy victory point causes 100 additional casualties to this army until the army disbands. Sometimes a general needs to hold a position regardless of cost. A final stand trades Imperial lives for every inch of ground that would otherwise be lost. The order is rarely used. Even if the army is not wiped out, it would almost certainly be severely weakened. When an attacking force must be allowed to gain territory or establish a beachhead, it is incredibly effective. Love. The new Dawnish army could have the Guardian quality. Choosing this quality has no additional costs. Dawn is a land that understands love as much as it understands glory. Not just the true love that flowers from romance, but all the other forms of love as well. The love of friends, of family, of battle comrades. The troubadours know a great deal about love and its cousins' loyalty, courage, and pride. Embracing this ideal and the glory that comes with selflessness and courage could see the new army put great stock in protecting and supporting other armies, eschewing risk and reckless behaviour, and looking to preserve the lives of companions and fellow soldiers. This would give the army the Guardian quality and allow the general to issue the Steel Roses order. Steel Roses. The ability of this army to capture territory is reduced by 1/5. All casualties suffered by this army are reduced by 1/10. All casualties suffered by allied armies in the same territory who are taking offensive orders are reduced by a tenth. The army takes advantage of heavy armour and shields to endure the attacks of their foes and protect the soldiers who fight alongside them. The army includes war witches, well versed in spells of healing, physics, and yearfolk trackers adept at locating those who are sorely pressed by foes. But at its core are knights prepared to do what it takes to keep their allies alive. These courageous warriors push to the front wherever they can and do everything possible to save the lives of those who have fallen. Challenge. The new Dornish army could have the Vanguard quality. Choosing this quality has no additional costs. It is a simple fact that it was Dornish armies, alongside their Varushkan allies, that first took the fight to the Malum, and almost single-handedly captured Ossium, the first crack in the seemingly impenetrable facade of the Druge armies. Most recently they have claimed the Barrens, and yet there are always more lands to be conquered. The Knights of Dawn are eager for the chance to prove themselves against the challenge of barbarian lands, to push back the borders of the Empire once again until the entire world acknowledges its sovereignty. It would be an easy matter to capitalise on this enthusiasm for conquest and liberation, and raise an army with the Vanguard quality, allowing its general to issue the First to the Fray attacking order. First to the Fray. This army does not suffer a penalty when attempting to seize the first region in a territory. This army does not suffer a penalty when attacking a region that is not adjacent to an existing Imperial-controlled region in the same territory. Using this order, the Dornish army is able to attack new territory without difficulty, twice as effectively as any normal army. They lead the way in battle, an irresistible advance across the land they have marked as their own, driving their enemies before them. The normal problems caused by having to maintain supply lines do not apply to them. What they do not carry with them, they take from the land they conquer. They focus on lightning attacks, looking to overcome the defenders before they even know they're being invaded, so that the difficulties presented by stretched supply lines do not have time to cause them difficulty. Once the first region falls and a beachhead is established, they can turn their attention almost anywhere else in the territory without concern for its location, potentially surprising the enemy or seizing key locations of strategic importance before the enemy knows the danger. Witchery. The magicians of Spiral Castle believe that the army could have the magic quality. This would require an additional commission, a Circle of the War Witch be built in Weirwater. It would remove the ability of Dawn to support a College of Magic. Circle of the War Witch. Commission type, Edifice. Location, near Spiral Castle, Weirmore, Weirwater. Cost, 25 white granite, 75 crowns in labour. Additional cost, removes the ability of Dawn to support a new College of Magic. Effect, creates a training ground for practicing and training battlefield magicians in the Dornish War Witch tradition, allows the new army to have the magic quality. Availability, opportunities lost if the new Dornish army takes a different quality. While these qualities are being mulled over, a fourth opportunity is put on the table by the Scions of House de Cassilon, the custodians of Spiral Castle in Weirwater. Over the course of the last few years, it seems, the yearfolk of the house have been securing excellent contacts with the artisans of Astalad, especially those who specialise in the creation of rods, staves, and suits of magic armour. The orchards in the Weirwood Grove of Spiral Castle are rich in fine woods, and the reeves and retainers have parlayed this into a remarkable number of tools related to the arts of the war witches. Inspired by the magical aura that blankets Dawn in the run-up to the spring equinox, they suggest that it might be time to try and harness the arcane majesty of Dornish magicians. To do this, they propose the Circle of the War Witch be constructed in Wickmoor, in the vale below the castle. This would serve as a place for the mistresses of war magic, those preeminent practitioners of battle magic, to gather, teach, and perfect their skills. Spiral Castle would provide hospitality and maintain the circle, but any curriculum will be up to the war witches themselves. All that would be needed to establish the circle would be a large open-air duelling and training ground, a circle of stone bounded by a dozen carved monoliths. This proposal is an edifice that will require 25 wains of white granite and 75 crowns to construct, but would only take a single season to complete. Obviously, the need to complete the commission would mean that there would be an inevitable delay of at least a season before the army gained its new quality. Once it were built, however, the War Witches of Dawn would flock to the army, alongside other martially minded magicians, and the army would gain the magic quality without further delay. Once the edifice was complete, the new army would gain the rare magic quality. The soldiers would be trained to fight alongside Dawn's witches, whose skills would be in great demand. Enchanters from across Dawn would be invited to contribute their expertise in ritual magic to the support of the army, and even some of the Yearfolk geysers would be given a place as scouts and infiltrators alongside the more glorious members of the army. There is one additional cost, however. There are only so many magicians in a nation, even one as steeped in arcane traditions as Dawn. Drawing on the witches, enchanters, and geysers in this way would mean that it would become impossible to build a college of magic in Dawn without an exceptional opportunity. If the army gained the magic quality, it would allow the general to issue the defending order of arcane consolidation, but it would also allow imperial magicians to use the army in place of a suitable regio when they need to cast spells on things that cannot be reached from the imperial regio. Arcane consolidation. The army generates mana crystals based on the number of victory points generated. Does not change army strength, casualties inflicted, or casualties suffered. The army concentrates on making magical preparations, shoring up their reserves of mana crystals, and seeking out nearby sources of magic. A portion of this bounty in the form of mana crystals is passed to the army general, so that they can make the most appropriate use of it. Ritual targeting. This army contains many specialized magicians and magical experts. The general of the army, or the egregore if the general is not at Anvil, can serve as a focus for any ritual that targets a territory, region, or fortification, replacing the requirement for that ritual to be performed at a regio in the target territory. This only works for the rituals targeting the territory where the army is currently on campaign. The general must be present throughout the ritual. Examples of rituals that can be empowered in this way might include Frozen Citadel of Cathan Canay, although the target territory must still contain a suitable region, Stalwart Stand on Solid Ground, or a curse such as Rivers Run Red, or Neve's Twisting Blight. Further reading: Imperial Army, Imperial Qualities.